Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back, I hope, for most of you, to Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont. Bruce is off this evening, and I am Paul Lisnick, sitting in his chair tonight. Well, yeah, not this actual chair, but I'm the WGN-TV political analyst and host of WGN-TV Political Report, which you can catch on Sunday mornings at 9, and it repeats tonight at 1:30 in the morning, just in case you missed it. Joining me now to have a discussion beyond the pandemic now and into a whole host of political issues, including some of the key Senate races around the country, because one would have thought there was no chance of the Senate changing hands. Well, Democrats think there might be a chance. Let me introduce the panel to you. Joining us from Los Angeles is Douglas Herman. He's a Democratic consultant with the Strategy Group. Doug, good evening to you. And in Chicago, Josh Cantro, a regular face for those of you on Beyond the Beltway, and also from my former show called Politics Tonight. He is an attorney and a Republican strategist. So, gentlemen, let's get into a bunch of issues. Doug, let me start with you. I want to talk a bit about the Black Lives Matter effort we've seen and the protests over these last period of several weeks, tied to the defund the police kind of notion. You're our Democratic strategist tonight, so I understand what's behind it. But let me ask you, as a concept, defund the police, Doug, is that not a risky thing for Democrats to be arguing when you have President Trump, who, of course, is going to make that sound like Democrats don't even want police?
Well, he's already doing that. So whether or not the Democrats are coming up with the best term or not is immaterial, because the Trump campaign and Donald Trump himself are going to take and spin that in the worst possible way. I think that what you're seeing with the defund police movement is there was a sea change in public opinion at the beginning of this month, and rightfully so. There was some pretty terrible and demonstrably bad things happening on TV that we were all seeing and being exposed to, with some pretty horrible violence that should not be occurring. And so what you saw out of that was a marked sea change. And you know, we have not seen anything this rapid and this quick of a public opinion change probably at all in our lifetime. These guys came from basically not very well known to having 2/3 of the public supporting their agenda, or at least their broad agenda. And the reason I say at least their broad agenda is because I'm not sure that the defund police movement has been thought through all the way in the context that when you say that, it sounds like we're shutting down the police department. And that's absolutely not what people are looking to do. When you look at the polls and when you look at the responses that people are giving, they don't want to shut down the police department, but they do want to take the load off of the police officers for handling social calls and calls that do not require police intervention and police action. And so I think that that's where folks are looking to see some changes. And I think they're also looking for policy changes so that we don't see these things happen on the streets that are killing innocent people or killing people innocently for no reason.
Sorry, Josh, let me take that expand on that a little bit. You're our Republican strategist. And so, you know, essentially, as the Black Lives Matters movement has, you know, certainly caught a lot of attention for a lot of people, a lot of support of a lot of people. The president has, in one instance, referred to it as hate speech. In addition, it's extended now to the Confederate soldiers, being taken down, and the president sort of, making a big argument about that. Do you think the president is handling the Black Lives Matter movement and then what has happened since then, tied to what I just said? Is he handling that in the most positive way strategically?
No, he's not. He's handled it very poorly, in my view, and I think that accounts for the part of the drop in poll numbers that we're seeing. I'm not going to come on here and spin and say everything's hunky-dory in Trump land, because it's not. I also think, though, that the Republican Congress has not handled it well either. They have not had the law enforcement's back. They've been too craven to this movement. The word defund means something very specific. It means get rid of the funds for this department. And I think that's a strategic mistake on the part of that movement. And Doug said that, well, they don't really mean that, but that's what Minneapolis is trying to do. They're really trying to abolish their police department there. And so I think that, both the president on the one hand, who's carrying it too far, he shouldn't be defending Confederate generals at all. But he ought to be defending Jefferson and Washington and the statues of our founding fathers that are being toppled and defaced as well. But the Republican Congress doesn't have the police's back, I don't think.
We're going to talk later about possible vice presidential picks for Joe Biden, but because of what you just said, Josh, Doug, I want to ask you this. Tammy Duckworth last week on the Sunday morning CNN show, or one of the evening shows, she was asked about what about taking down statues of Washington and Jefferson. I had a sense that she sort of had moved on in her head to other issues, but nevertheless, her answer was, well, we ought to have a national dialogue about it. And of course, the president, or at least Tucker Carlson, have had a field day with that. Is that a mistake for Democrats to, I haven't heard the Democrats say take down Washington and Jefferson, but is it a mistake for them to even say, let's have a national dialogue about it?
I don't think it's a mistake to have a national dialogue about this. There has been no dialogue, and we've never even had a conversation about the Confederate soldiers, who I think the movement rightfully deemed and termed as losers and traitors. That's the first time that kind of terminology has been used, and that's true. That should be happening. But I'm not sure that having a conversation is the worst thing. I'm not sure that we should go taking down Washington and Jefferson memorials either, but at least having a conversation so that we can get some things out in the open and put it on the table is a fair request.
By the way, Josh, somebody put on Facebook as a comment, Tammy was outright nasty. I assume that means in her response to Tucker Carlson and what she said. Was she nasty, or would you say, Josh, even as a Republican, she was defending herself? She was also offended by the attacks.
Well, I think that she opened herself up to the attacks. I don't know whether she had moved on or not, but her comment could have been construed as we should have a discussion about our founding fathers, Washington and Jefferson. And I got to tell you, at times Tucker Carlson does go too far, but he's having a field day because she gave him that opening. And for Doug to say, I mean, and I respect Doug and all of that, but I mean, no, we shouldn't have a conversation about Washington and Jefferson. And if the Democrats want to run on that and want to run on that conversation, then that's going to put the Trump campaign back in the game. But Trump should not be running on protecting Confederate generals. There's got to be a distinction. As far as I'm concerned, those statues, that can be left up to the local communities, but I'm no fan of those statues. I'm from the South, okay? But the founding fathers, forget about it. That's where I think most Americans, even probably half the Democrats, would draw the line.
Doug, it almost seems like that discussion can become a distraction. As I said, I'm not sure any Democrats want to tear down Washington and Jefferson, but I understand the dialogue. They owned slaves, and they had very complex lives. But you also had the story about during this past week or just before of the president apparently learning that Putin was paying bounties for the heads of Americans, essentially for the deaths of Americans, I should say, in Afghanistan, and didn't react to it. He says he was never briefed. Others say he were. But now the Democrats, it's like you don't even hear about that anymore, Doug.
Well, this is part of the problem with Donald Trump, and part of this is by design, and part of it's just because of who he is. He's always trying to create basically anti-aircraft flak, so that, what he's trying to do, he's just dropping flak bombs out, just like the old World War II planes were going by when they were doing their bombing runs. He's got all this flak coming out, and he's trying to distract everybody, and a scandal a day has the ability to do that. And, frankly, I think the public has been numbed by all of his scandals, the way in which he's done this, and the volume and the speed with which he shifts gears. You just can't keep up with this guy. It's impossible for a regular person to do that.
All right.
Well, if I could
We're going to take a break, Josh. I will come to you right after we take the break. Folks want to call in 800-723-8289. A whirlwind of topics tonight. You do not want to change the channel because there's a lot to talk about. We'll be back on Beyond the Belt. And welcome back to Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont. I'm Paul Lisney from WGN-TV, sitting in for Bruce tonight, along with my friends Doug Herman, Democratic consultant, and Josh Cantro, Republican attorney and strategist. Josh, just before the break, we were talking about the story about the president being briefed about the Russians offering money for the deaths of American soldiers. I will tell you to let you comment on that. Somebody on Facebook put the comment the president wasn't briefed on that because the intelligence wasn't verified. But that's not really what it takes to get intelligence to the president, is it?
Yeah, and I don't really know so much about that. I wanted to respond more to Doug's comment about the president and these alleged scandals, and that it's one thing after another, and that he's too aggressive. He can be. And you know what? I criticized him for that. But also, let me say this. This is the first Republican we've had in 20 years who's fought back against the media. George Bush let the media run all over him, and McCain and Romney did as well. And Trump is a fighter, and he won the White House. And Republicans should be grateful for that, even never Trump Republicans. These scandals, we're going to see the biggest scandal could be after John Durham issues his report about what the outgoing administration did to spy on the Trump campaign. So I think that this president, who's been investigated a lot, he's still standing tall. And I think that Republicans should respect that.
Josh, I'm going to stay with you with this next question. Doug, come to you. But as we know, the president just pardoned Roger Stone, who was convicted, I believe, of 7 offenses. Even Robert Mueller issuing an op-ed today saying, look, the guy was convicted and he was guilty. Even William Barr really thought that Stone should have done time. But my question to you is, President Trump always presents himself as the law and order president. He says it all the time. He tweets it all the time. Does he get to be the law and order president if indeed he is pardoning folks like Roger Stone and maybe some others before the election?
I'm not a huge fan of the Stone pardon. I'm going to say it right there. I think the timing of it was bad. He could have waited until after the election. Having said that, there were a lot of irregularities with Stone and with how he was investigated and why they went after him. So I don't have a huge problem with it, but I understand the criticism. Does it hurt on the law and order front? I don't think so, because the law and order he's talking about is the law and order that most people are concerned about, and that is being victims of a crime.
Doug, let me go to that piece with you on Roger Stone. Look, the argument is for Democrats. We'll hear about it for a couple of days. Several members of Congress issuing statements. Mitt Romney, Republican senator, issuing a statement or a tweet about it anyway. But like so many other things, it's just something else. The Democrats, they'll just move on to something else, right?
Well, and again, back to the Trump thing, they probably will just move on, but it doesn't mean that it's right. And this is incredible. This was an amazing feat of hubris and just political retribution. This week we saw Vindman have to leave and resign his post because of his work in the impeachment trial and what he did to blow the whistle there. We also saw the commutation of Roger Stone's sentence. This looks like a Russian Politburo move, not something that the United States president would be doing. The kinds of things that Trump has been doing are the kinds of things that if we were watching foreign countries do this, we would be sending in observers and parties to stop this kind of activity and behavior. And we would be setting up programs to stop these corruptions that are occurring under the Trump administration. It's just outrageous that it continues like this.
Let's move on to talk about. Go ahead, Josh.
I just want to respond. I mean, Doug uses the term corruptions. Well, Trump hasn't been convicted of anything. He's been investigated. The Mueller investigation went nowhere, and the impeachment went nowhere. And so I think we're using the term corruptions too quickly. If you want to look at pardons, there are always controversial pardons that presidents issue. Obama, Bush, Clinton issued a slew of them that were very controversial to campaign contributors, including Mark Rich and others. And I don't remember the Democrats really complaining about it back then. So pardons are always controversial.
Okay, like I said, I've got a ton of topics this hour, so it's going to seem like a whirlwind. But Doug, let me come to you. I wanted to take a look at Joe Biden's VP pick or the possibilities of it. Even Amy Klobuchar took herself out of the race and said, Joe, you need to pick an African-American woman. There is the name Tammy Duckworth being bandied about. She's Thai. She's not African-American. But what do you think? Do you have a sense from everything you hear of what direction Biden might go? And of course, Kamala Harris from California, your home state, she's talked about as well.
Yeah, and Kamala's leading the pack in terms of, when you look at all the handicapping stories that are out there, she's the odds-on favorite to be the pick. But I think there's a host of folks who are capable and would make good additions to the ticket. Tammy Duckworth, we've spoken about. Karen Bassett has received a lot of mentions. recently, and she's done a lot of great work on police reform issues and has really taken the lead on those kinds of things. She's a very seasoned and pragmatic leader. She comes from California. She was the Assembly Speaker, so she's somebody who could be really solid. I think Val Demings has a lot of potential. The mayor from Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. There's a host of women who fit that criteria. If the pick is to find an African-American woman, a Black woman for Joe Biden to be on the ticket, there's a host of well-qualified women who fit that criteria.
You probably would have included Susan Rice, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Josh, so here's how I'm going to give you that question. I know you're Republican, but be honest now.
Yeah.
Is there a Democratic pick, given the fact that most people don't vote for whoever that is anyway? It's all about the presidential candidate. But is there anybody that would keep you up at night that you'd say, that's tough?
In terms of if they became president?
No, well, you can analyze it however you want. But I mean, is there a vice presidential pick that Biden could make that you would hear and go, wow, that one is tough for us?
No, I don't think it really matters. I think that Biden is so mentally incompetent that whoever he picks is eventually going to be president if the Biden ticket wins in November. I mean, Biden is just losing it. So, I think all of these candidates that Doug mentioned have real problems. And
by the way, Doug, speaking on that issue, it is interesting. Clearly, Republicans and Trump are going to put that on Joe Biden. You're seeing the ads. He's not ready for this. He's losing it. President Trump announcing, I think yesterday, that he took a mental test of some sort and he aced it.
Yeah, my understanding of that cognitive test is that it's not a very difficult test to ace, and it's pretty basic stuff. And the fact that he's bragging about that, and I think there's real concerns about what Trump has done in office, the activities that he's done. There's a lot of speculation about whether or not he's got issues health-wise and whether or not he's up to it. We don't know why he went to Walter Reed in the middle of the night 6 months ago. We still have no answer to that. We've seen him having physical difficulties, but we don't know what's going on. And I think it's something that we should be concerned about because we don't have his health records. We don't have his financial records. There's a broken record on this. We don't know what's really going on behind the curtain with Trump on his health.
Josh, both of them can point to each other. They can both make ads, and they have that says the other one's losing it.
Right. And I mean, there is a great video compilation, 20 minutes of Joe Biden just in the past few months losing it. I mean, there's the video of him sucking on his wife's finger as he's delivering a speech. He can't put two sentences together. It is just clear that this man, who was never smart to begin with, he lied about his law school grades. He was actually in the very bottom of his class, barely got through. This is someone who was never smart to begin with and is now in serious cognitive decline. And it's just obvious for all to see.
In fairness, Josh, does it bother you that the president won't even let us see his records? The records at Wharton have been buried somewhere.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I would love to have rules of engagement where records have to be released. Obama didn't release any of his academic records. Why should Trump? So, I mean, there's a precedent there. But there ought to be rules of engagement about tax records, financial records, academic records, and medical records going forward. Maybe there's a commission, and then you get bipartisan legislation. But right now, they're playing according to the rules as they are.
Doug, here's a multiple choice question for you. Conway West enters the race because A, he really is a Trump fan and wants to take African-American votes from Joe Biden, or B, he's an idiot.
Or C, he never really actually follows through and gets on the ballot, which is more likely. My sense is that this is just another Kanye distraction. And, we spend a lot of time talking about Joe Biden's capabilities and whether he's up for the job. And, one thing that he hasn't done, and that's to preside over the deaths of more than 130,000 Americans from COVID. And, when we talk about all of these other things and don't mention these deaths and Trump's disastrous handling of it, we're whistling past the graveyard on this literally and not thinking about and talking about the real issues here, because it's not about Biden's health. It's about Trump's record.
Trump is not responsible for those COVID deaths. We have a federal system, as Doug knows, and ultimately it's up to the governors, the mayors, and the local officials to do what they can do. We would have had these deaths under any administration. And
well, Josh, let me follow. You think, but there has been no federal approach. You're right. The president has said, let the governors do their thing. Would we not be in a different place if the president had said, look, national mask wearing policy or anything on a federal level?
He doesn't have the authority to do that. He has no authority to do that. I mean, the president would have liked to have done certain things, but it's up to the governors. Look, the president was on this way before Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio were. The president shut down China travel at the end of January, or at least most of it. And de Blasio and Cuomo were saying, we want to be open, and they didn't shut down until toward the end of March. You had Fauci himself saying on March 7th, it's fine to go on cruises. So to lay 130,000 deaths at Trump, or any of the deaths at Trump, is just wrong.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to turn to the Senate races to see whether the Senate might turn powers in this next election. I do see several callers on some of the earlier topics. I thank you for that. But others can also call in 800-723-8289. We'll be right back on Beyond the Belt. Beltway with Bruce DuMont. I'm Paul Listening from WGN-TV in for Bruce tonight. We're continuing our very fast-moving conversation with my guest, Democrat Doug Herman, the Democratic consultant with the strategy group from Los Angeles, and old-time friend Josh Cantrow, a Republican attorney and a Republican, well, I guess you're a regular attorney, right? And a Republican strategist as well. I wonder how that play out in the courtroom. I want to turn now to the fight for the U.S. Senate. Because to be honest, Doug, up until a period of time ago, I mean, Democrats didn't even talk about the Senate turning. There wasn't a chance. Do you still see it that way?
Absolutely not. The Senate is 100% in reach and likely at this point to turn. If you run through the states that you need to have, Arizona, we got a 7-point lead there. Colorado, we got a 10-point lead. We're beating Susan Collins in Maine. We're beating Tom Tillis in North Carolina. And the important thing that goes along with that is that the presidential race is in most of those states, an even bigger lead for Biden. And so when Biden's winning the state and bringing the ticket at the top through, the Senate candidates are likely to come with him. And in those 4 states alone, we could take the Senate back. We've got Iowa with Teresa Greenfield and Joni Ernst is now very competitive, and Ernst is in big trouble there. And you got Steve Bullock running strong in Montana against Daines. And so there are 6 races right now that are legitimately Democratic opportunities for pickups. And there's another half dozen that are huge headaches for the Republicans. Races like Mitch McConnell coming in with a very aggressive challenge from Amy McGrath. You've got Lindsey Graham, who's getting challenged by Jaime Harrison, who's raising money by the stacks. And you've got places with Kansas. We've got Democratic candidates there who are raising money in stacks, millions of dollars per quarter. So what's happened is that the field has expanded dramatically. And it's also, the final point here is that a lot of the states that are competitive here are because there's corona problems. And so you can't disassociate that from the political problems that you're seeing with the Republican Party.
Josh, in some of the moderate states, maybe a Cory Gardner of Colorado or a Susan Collins of Maine, you sort of see them, or at least Susan Collins certainly lately, running away from President Trump.
Yeah.
They attached themselves to him for a very long time. My question now is, in these Senate races, first of all, do you fear, I mean, as a Republican, you're going to say you don't, but candidly, do you fear the Democrats could turn the Senate? And secondly, what do you say in some of these moderate states where essentially people have supported the president no matter what, and maybe now does it cost them?
I mean, look, Paul, I'm going to speak candid with you. I'm not going to come on and spin. I mean, I think we're hearing some spin from Doug, but that's fine. I wrote a piece in American Thinker today in which I laid it out. I said President Trump's reelection prospects do not look good at the moment. But at the same time, I think that the polls are probably not picking up some Trump voters. And as to Doug's point about big trouble, I wouldn't say anybody's in big trouble right now, because the reality is is that most Americans are not paying attention, and we're political junkies, and the people that watch this show are political junkies. But the reality is that most Americans are not paying attention now. They will come sometime after Labor Day, and especially as you get into late September and early October. So to say that someone's in big trouble right now, I think is wrong. But I do see trouble on the horizon, and I am concerned.
I'm going to take this. We've got a caller. We got several callers, but I want to talk to Ron. He's from Michigan, Berrien Springs, Michigan, Berrien Springs. And Ron, and the reason I want to take you is because you are saying Republicans fear Tammy Duckworth. We've had that discussion, but you heard Josh say, no, we don't. What is your thought?
Paul, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and Tammy Duckworth, once her story gets out with her family background going back to the Revolutionary War, but just to bring it up to the Vietnam War, her father was a helicopter pilot, two tours in Vietnam. Okay, and Tammy is Thai American, but she speaks fluent Thai, fluent Indonesian. Okay, it's the American story, selling flowers as a teenager on the streets of Honolulu to support her family, living on food stamps. Okay, and to attack her patriotism, her right to speak out with the sacrifices she's given in her family. Tucker Klansmen and Trump, they fear her because they are trying to give her the Max Cleland swift boat attack early. Because, like I said, she should be at the top of the ticket, all right, in my opinion. But Tammy Duckworth, she's a winning candidate. She's winning for the Democrats. Anybody that Joe picks, I will vote for. But Tammy will bring the House down. She will. You cannot intimidate her. She has thrown down the gauntlet. She has called Trump cadet bone spurs. She threw that out early. She's a fighter. Let's get the fight on, okay? Let's get the fight on.
Ron, thank you. Doug, let me come to you on that. And here's the point. We heard what Ron said. But then again, we also know Republicans are very good at this. They took down John Kerry. That was the swift boat situation. Ron mentioned Max Cleland. They took him out. I mean, these war veterans, that is not anything Republicans seem to fear. So if Tammy is on the ticket, you have Donald Trump, who's never served a day. Even Tucker Carlson's never served in the Army. But for some reason, when it comes to voting, that service to the military thing, while many respect it, Republicans just seem to be able to get that issue put aside.
It's not only that they put it aside, they denigrate it, and they do some really horrible and repugnant things. What happened to Max Cleland, what happened to John Kerry, what they've done to Tammy Duckworth. These are not the things we should do to our veterans. This is not how they should be treated. Excuse me. The political process does not bring that in. Just because they're participants in it does not mean that they should have their service record tarnished. And the Republicans seem to take great joy and glee in doing this. And I don't understand why they do that, because they should be venerating these people, not denigrating them.
Can I respond, Paul?
Yeah.
I just want to say this. Doug talks about horrible and repugnant. Like, this is something that Republicans do, and it's only Republicans that do. I could go down a litany of things that the Democrats did to Mitt Romney, including Harry Reid getting on the Senate floor and calling Mitt Romney a tax cheat, and later saying, yeah, I didn't have any proof of that, but I just kind of did it for sport because I could, and I had immunity on the Senate floor. I could go on and on and on. This is politics. As far as Ron's comment about, Tammy Duckworth would bring the House down, no vice presidential candidate has ever brought the House down. It's been shown by poll after poll after poll over centuries that vice presidential candidates have negligible impact on the presidential race.
But Josh, even you here, you said this one makes a difference because it's your expectation that person's likely to step in.
Oh, I mean, Biden, I said on this show last time that Biden wouldn't be the eventual nominee. I'm still not clear that he will be, because his mental incompetence is so striking. Every time he comes out, he just is losing it. So we could be talking about the eventual candidate. In that case, well, you know what? It would make a bigger difference. But if we're talking about a traditional vice presidential role, it just hasn't made much of a difference.
Josh, let me stay with you. I'm going to switch topics again to the Daca situation. We know that the Trump administration fought Daca. The Supreme Court essentially said it's not going anywhere because Trump administration, you didn't handle this properly. Then the president came out and said, well, you know what? We're going to handle this properly and get rid of Daca by November. And then yesterday, in an interview with Fox, he goes, he went back and forth between an executive order and a bill, but somewhere in there, he plans to issue something that saves Daca. What's going on with him, Josh, in the Daca situation?
I think he's trying to figure out politically whether it helps him or not. That's the honest answer. In terms of whether he can pick up some Hispanic American votes by doing this. Look, John Roberts, it was a procedural issue. He says that the Trump administration didn't go through the administrative procedures correctly.
Yeah.
And it was a disappointing decision to a lot of us. But in any event, that's the law of the land. And so
Doug, let me come to you on that. Immigration, a hot issue. It's the president's number one issue all the way through. So once again, they often say Democrats can grab defeat out of the jaws of victory, right? So my question is on this immigration issue in Daca, if the president issues some sort of executive order that provides a path to citizenship, which is what he said he was going to do, does the president win on immigration going into November?
Absolutely not. You've got to look at this guy's record in the totality, and a promise to do something is not a promise that is not an action that's executed. And Trump has made promises to do things, all kinds of things over the course of his presidency, and just making a pledge to do it doesn't mean he's going to do it. And whether it's going to be an actual bill or an executive order or gets done is still to be determined, because tomorrow that thought is going to be very far from his mind.
Doug, on the healthcare issue, I want to get both of you in before we take the break, but on the healthcare issue, the president has said we're here to take care of pre-existing conditions and whatever, although the argument before the Supreme Court by the Trump administration, made just a couple of weeks ago again, is the Affordable Health Care Act has to go. And yet the president says we're here to give you great health care. The president has a strong base. They don't move from that, Doug.
They don't move from that, but he says that, but at the same time, he has no plan. And pre-existing condition coverage is the most popular part of the Affordable Care Act. It's the reason why it was passed. It was the impetus for getting it passed. And Trump has no plan. There's nothing moving through Congress for protecting that and keeping that protection in place. And there's no executive order that he's going to administer that also does that. And so there is no plan. He just wanted to take it away simply to spite Obama and take away that victory.
Josh, I want to give you a chance to respond to that because healthcare is critical, and the Republicans keep saying repeal, but I don't know what the replacement is.
Yeah, I think that's a bad issue for the Republicans. I think the Republicans just need to leave healthcare alone. They had their chance. They had complete control of government for 2 years, and they blew it. And I was very critical of that effort at the time. But at this point, so close to an election, I don't think that's a good issue for them. I do think law and order, and I do think toppling monuments and statues and things like that are good issues, but they need to be articulated better. Healthcare is not an issue.
Yeah, and there's a lot of the pandemic is going to be a critical issue coming up as well. All right, we're going to take one final break in the show. Callers that want to talk about the Supreme Court, 1-800-723-8289, the political implications of the Supreme Court's decision this term. We'll be right back on Beyond the Belt. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Beltway with Bruce DuMont, Paul Lisnick from WGN-TV sitting in for Bruce, along with my guests, who I'll reintroduce in a second. But I do want you to know that Beyond the Beltway has a GoFundMe effort going on because the satellite transmission we use to bring this to you ain't free. So if you would like to visit that, it is a GoFundMe page for Beyond the Beltway. You'll help support the satellite transmission of the show. Returning to my guest, Democrat Doug Herman out of Los Angeles, the strategy group, Republican Josh Canstrell, Republican strategist, and I did read your article today that you wrote, lots of writing from you. So let's talk about the Supreme Court, but in a general way. I understand our viewers and listeners are not all lawyers. So Doug, I'm going to start with you. Josh is a lawyer, but one of the questions has been, the president's made 2 appointments to the Supreme Court, and in some critical cases involving LGBTQ plus rights and some other cases, hey, his picks didn't do what people expected them to do. So is it your sense going into this election that the president now has a stronger argument to say, hey, I need to appoint even more Supreme Court justices? Or does it hurt him basically saying, I guess your picks aren't doing what you want them to do anyway? What do you think, Doug?
Well, I think that there's a little bit of the fact that these picks aren't doing the things that he wants, and these are legitimate issues where they're breaking from him and his political agenda, and it's not like they're taking the wrong position. And one of these decisions was 7-2. Another one, these are not squeaking through at 5-4 for the most part. These are big decisions that are coming through, and the justices that he appointed are certainly not voting for him in his way. But we've got a host of other judges. He's got 200 judges he's appointed. The impact of the Trump presidency on the judgeships in America is going to be long lasting.
Josh, it's almost as though the Supreme Court saves the drama for last. It's not the way they work, but they heard the Trump tax case, I think, on May 14th. And so the last decision they issued were indeed the two Trump tax cases, the efforts of congressional committees that want financial records from the president, and the Southern District of New York, who also wants financial records because of a criminal investigation. So while those were 7-2 decisions as well, both Trump appointees took the position the president is not above the law. You're a lawyer, Josh. I'm assuming you don't have any bad things to say about the justices for taking that position, do you? Oh, by the way, the two dissenters even agreed the president is not above the law.
Oh, of course, I have no issue with that. But a few things I would note. Doug talked about, like this has been a big defeat for the president. The president has won a lot of cases at the Supreme Court. There were a few in the past few weeks that went against him, but by and large, he's winning at the Supreme Court. Secondly, I find it interesting that why is it always the conservative justices that move to the middle? Why don't we ever see the so-called liberal justices do that? And I think,
by the way, you did get that a little bit. I mean, the Oklahoma case, you actually did have some of the liberals shift over on a couple of those cases, but okay. Okay,
but I'm just saying, before, it was Anthony Kennedy swung to the center. Now it's John Roberts is the center vote. Why don't we see that with the Democratic appointed justices? But I think Roberts is trying to show that the court has, independence and all of that. But overall, Doug, I will agree with something Doug said. The Trump administration's impact on the court is going to be long lasting. You've got almost a better chance of winning the lottery than getting a case heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. Most cases are decided by the 300 district court judges and appellate court judges that Trump has appointed. And that's going to be a key, long-lasting impact of his first administration.
Doug, some people say the Supreme Court really shouldn't be about politics anyway. Chief Justice Roberts, who is no liberal, and on most social issues cases, you can count on him to be a conservative vote, but it's almost as though he seems to be looking beyond that. These years will be known as the Roberts Court. It's just the way it works. The years of Chief Justice John Roberts will be the Roberts Court. And because Anthony Kennedy is off the court, who was the swing vote, it's almost as though John Roberts feels it's me or nobody right now. On the Transgender LGBTQ Civil Rights Act, as you mentioned, it was 7-2. Roberts voted with the liberals, but he wasn't even needed in that case. It was, Gorsuch who basically stepped over and said the word sex encompasses all those people, a Trump appointee. Is it your sense that we will see more of this balance from Chief Justice Roberts because indeed he will view this as his legacy?
I think so. I mean, he's taken a really firm control of this court, and he's really put his stamp on it in terms of the decisions that are coming out and the direction that those decisions are taking. So I think this is a very clear leadership by Supreme Court Justice Roberts, and what he's doing is going to be remembered, maybe up in the annals of the greats, but we'll see in the end where his legacy ends up. But he's done some pretty impressive things recently in terms of running the court and making some decisions that don't have exactly the best receptions at the White House.
By the way, Josh, just before we wrap, I'm leaving the Supreme Court for a moment, but the president not happy with mail-in voting as a possibility. Many other people just going, the whole military votes by mail, and you voted by mail, Mr. President. You have a problem with mail-in voting?
I do, with massive mail-in voting, because of what we're seeing with ballot harvesting, both by Democrats in California and Republicans in North Carolina. I think that we have to have better safeguards. The polls should be plenty safe to go to. People can wear masks. The coronavirus is still around, and that's really how it should be done. In-person voting, where there is less potential for voter fraud and voter harvesting.
Doug, what do you think?
We should expand the use of mail voting as widely and as broadly as possible. The only instance of fraud that's ever occurred has been the Republicans down in North Carolina in a congressional campaign. There's no fraud in California. This is a conservative talking point that they trot out every election, talking about ballot harvesting in California. There's no such thing as ballot harvesting. California has set up its laws and rules so that your vote counts. When you decide to vote, your vote's going to count. And if you cast it, it's going to get counted. And they've extended the deadline to send in a mail ballot. They've opened up early ballot centers, and they've expanded the mail voting. That's what should be done in every state, not just California.
Guys, I wish we had another hour, but we don't. My thanks to Doug Herman and Josh Pantro. Thank you guys. Great insight. I appreciate it. Our thanks as well to Andrew Morshell, Rick Dolman, and Michael Capicilli for their assistance in the production of this program. I'm Paul Lisnick. My pleasure to be in for Bruce DuMont this evening. Catch WGN TV Political Report every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. And with that, we will appreciate you joining Bruce again next week when he will be here. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. Good night.